Empire Earnings. Build your financial empire.
At 72 years old, Gregory Hutchinson is living the exact life most of us picture when we hear the word retirement. After a 44-year career as an IT expert at IBM, he clocked out for the final time and transitioned to the coastal waters. He and his wife sold their home, downsized to a quiet waterfront property in Snow Hill, Maryland, and now spend their time out on the boat. They don't live a lavish life, but they have the financial freedom to go out to dinner every single night if they want to. That freedom is anchored by a massive financial milestone. When Gregory crossed the retirement finish line, he had accumulated nearly $1 million inside a single 401k account. His situation represents the textbook definition of the American retirement dream. He worked hard, stayed loyal to one employer, and achieved financial independence through decades of dedication to a single wealth-building vehicle. This million-dollar milestone isn't isolated. Industry reports show average retirement balances jumped over 10% in 2025. Institutional features like auto-enrollment quietly push money from paychecks into the market, scaling savings without a single manual trade. Because much of that growth came from automated systems and market spikes, Gregory looks back on his success with a sense of unease. He admits he got lucky by riding that wave, and he deeply regrets not seeking professional guidance before he actually reached the finish line. Once the paycheck stopped, Gregory encountered a threat he hadn't planned for, a barrage of rapid expenses and heavy taxes coming from sources he didn't even know existed. Reaching the million-dollar threshold creates a dangerous illusion of safety. It masks a structural vulnerability that mere accumulation cannot fix. To understand why, we have to look at the two opposing faces of a financial life cycle. On the left, multiple small streams of income pool into a large reservoir over several decades. This is the accumulation phase. On the right, that same reservoir begins draining out through a single valve. This is the decumulation phase of retirement. The friction occurs because the strategies optimized for pushing money into an account are specifically ill-equipped for pulling it back out. When the pressure reverses, the structure begins to show its flaws. Relying on a monolithic 401k shifts from a point of pride into a restrictive, double-edged sword. The transition is often jarring. After 40 years building your life's work, you must immediately begin dismantling it to fund daily survival. Possessing a large sum of money introduces a mathematically distinct set of extraction problems that are entirely separate from the act of saving. Financial advice usually focuses on this, diversifying your investments. Workers spend decades splitting their money between different stocks and bonds to mitigate market risk, but that focus ignores the missing variable. While the investments are diversified, the account types are not. Everything is encased inside a single, rigid container. Because 401k money is saved pre-tax, the IRS treats every single dollar you extract as ordinary income. This creates a compounding negative feedback loop. To get enough actual cash to live on, you have to withdraw a larger amount. That larger withdrawal inflates your income, which pushes you into a more punitive tax bracket, which then forces you to withdraw even more money to cover the higher tax bill. This non-diversified structure weaponizes the tax code against the retiree. It turns standard cost of living expenses into an accelerated drain on your life savings. Gregory Hutchinson survived this trap because a roaring stock market masked the flaws in his plan. But relying on record market gains to outpace a heavy tax burden is a gamble. It is not a repeatable strategy for a secure transition. True security requires splitting wealth across 3 accounts: taxable, tax-deferred, and tax-free, long before paychecks stop. This system grants you power to dictate your tax bracket. You pull funds from the most efficient source yearly, entirely bypassing aggressive tax hazards. By anticipating these hidden decumulation expenses, you transition from being a passive passenger of the market to an active architect of your wealth. The vision of Snow Hill, the small recreational boat, and the dinners out becomes a lifestyle sustained by intentional design rather than market luck. This diversified financial structure provides the total control needed to navigate the tax code. It transforms a high score on a 401k statement into a sustainable, predictable income stream.
Most people navigate their careers with a persistent anxiety about a single target, the exact number required to finally stop working. In a new survey by Northwestern Mutual, Americans identified that average target as $1.27 million. That number is moving. It reflects a $20,000 increase from the $1.25 million reported just last year. The baseline expectation for financial survival in America now sits in seven-figure territory, creating an immense, heavy psychological pressure. The math pushing that target upward starts with a simple concept: the steady erosion of purchasing power caused by inflation. That inflation is compounded by a second variable, our dramatically extended lifespans. This timeline illustrates a scenario common in modern financial planning: retiring at age 60 and living to see your 100th birthday. This requires funding 4 consecutive decades of daily living expenses without a single incoming paycheck. The $1.27 million figure serves as a mathematical defense strategy against the reality of a longer, much more expensive life. However, looking solely at that $1.27 million average masks a massive divide in how different generations view their future. To see where the pressure really builds, we have to look at the demographic currently sitting in the peak anxiety zone: adults in their 50s. The retirement expectation for those in their 50s climbs to over $1.5 million. This group faces the finish line of their careers with the weight of inflation bearing down on their final earning years. Despite being close to retirement, the exact daily costs of post-work life remain an unknown. For those a decade away, the approaching reality of retirement creates an absolute peak in financial dread and overestimation. Curious, the data takes a sharp turn when we look at individuals currently in their 60s and 70s. These are the people who are either on the immediate threshold of retirement or are already living in it. For this older group, the financial target drops to less than $1 million. The survey shows a gap of $500,000 between those preparing for retirement and those actually surviving in it. These older adults are purchasing goods in the exact same inflated economy as the 50-somethings. Physically crossing the threshold of retirement shrinks the perceived cost of survival. Human psychology accounts for the $500,000 gap between the 50-somethings and those in their 70s. Wealth advisor Alip Patel describes this as a search for the mentality of feeling assured. The $1.5 million peak target often exceeds the mathematical requirements of a standard expense spreadsheet. This surplus serves as an emotional buffer, a premium paid for peace of mind against the terror of an unknown future. For the group in their 60s and 70s, post-work survival is a daily, measurable reality. The absolute peak of panic over savings occurs in anxious anticipation right before the regular paychecks finally stop. While a massive magic number helps fund a long future, it primarily funds current anxiety. The true cost of living drops the moment that future finally arrives. When you look up at a retirement target like $1 million, the sheer scale of that number can feel insurmountable. Across all age groups, Americans are missing these massive targets by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Right now, the average amount set aside for retirement is just under $90,000. Average savings for those in their 50s sit at $110,900, 60s at $112,500, and 70s at $113,900. Staring at a $900,000 gap creates financial paralysis. Instead of saving more, people abandon their target retirement age and decide to work longer. This shift happens because a multi-million-dollar goal often feels so big it becomes overwhelming. When the target seems unreachable, the calculation itself can trigger a sense of defeat that makes starting feel pointless. Working indefinitely is the modern default. The national target creeps to 65, and baby boomers plan for 71. The flaw in this strategy is basic biology. The human body has physical limits. Working into your late 60s demands a toll most cannot endure. This pie chart illustrates threats to the Work Forever plan. The largest slice, 44%, is declining health, just above the 43% who fear outliving savings. If your security requires laboring into your 70s, a single medical diagnosis destroys the system. Yet despite this looming biological threat, over half of savers are terrified of running out of money, more than they are of losing their physical health. You cannot guarantee you will have the physical stamina to work indefinitely. We have to stop relying on delayed retirement and mathematically fix the target before health fails. To replace the generic, terrifying million-dollar goal, you need a formula tailored specifically to your life. That begins with identifying your actual baseline income needs. You have to audit your bank statements and credit cards to see exactly what a year of your life costs. This Flim chart shows a standard calculation method. If your estimated annual budget is $100,000, you run that figure through a multiplier of 25. That calculation spits out a generic lump sum needed for retirement. Here, you are left looking at $2.5 million. The immediate trade-off here is the sheer size of the output. Seeing a target that large induces overwhelm and pushes people to abandon their plan. There is an alternative lever. Instead of chasing massive outputs, systematically lower your current budget, bringing it down to $80,000. The math instantly works in your favor. Running that lower budget through the same multiplier drops your target to $2 million. Doing this requires immediate, noticeable lifestyle sacrifices. You have to enforce strict, ongoing audits of your spending and choose to live on less right now. Systematically lowering your burn rate achieves a dual victory. You free up cash to save today, while simultaneously shrinking the massive mountain you have to climb tomorrow. You need a practical way to execute this burn rate reduction without feeling permanently deprived of your lifestyle. One tactic is a strict 1-month debit and credit card fast. By pausing all daily convenient purchases for 30 days, you rapidly expose your hidden discretionary spending and force a reset of your budget awareness. The trade-off is high psychological friction. You have to face the deep discomfort of deliberately stopping the small, automatic purchases you are used to making. Alternatively, you can initiate a short-term 3-month savings sprint, setting a specific dollar amount to stash away over 90 days. Breaking massive, lifelong goals down into these bite-sized chunks allows you to act. It bypasses the brain's natural panic response to long-term commitments. The downside of a sprint is that the actual dollar amount you save in 3 months will seem incredibly tiny compared to your ultimate goal. But the immediate cash value is completely irrelevant. The true return on investment is the permanent formation of long-term saving patterns. These micro-interventions are the essential bridge. They take the abstract math of cutting expenses and turn it into daily executed behavior. Applying these tactics requires looking at your specific life stage. This matrix shows how priorities shift. For late-stage savers in their 50s through 70s, the primary threat is declining health. Lacking decades for compound interest, the optimal strategy is aggressive expense reduction. The immediate action step is ruthlessly lowering your burn rate right now, before health forces an early exit. For early-stage savers, the primary threat is paralysis and overwhelm. Fixating on a 40-year horizon is destructive, making micro-habit formation the optimal strategy. The action step is executing a 3-month sprint or 1-month fast immediately, locking in discipline before lifestyle inflation takes root. These short-term habits help younger generations build the behavioral foundation needed for long-term success. It's about developing better patterns now, so you don't find yourself in your 60s trying to bridge a gap grown too large to manage. Regardless of your generation, the ultimate trade-off is identical. You must either aggressively increase your savings to fund your current lifestyle, or aggressively decrease your lifestyle to fit your current savings. Look at this staircase of standard retirement milestones. If you search for financial advice, you've almost certainly seen this formula. By age 30, you should have half your annual salary saved. By 40, double. And by the time you hit 60, you need 10 times your final salary tucked away. If reading those numbers gives you a knot in your stomach, you are not alone. For a massive portion of Americans, the reality looks completely different from these textbook targets. This comparison shows the actual math of the modern earner. In 2016, the median household income was roughly $59,000, but the personal savings rate, how much of that disposable income actually got set aside, was sitting at just 3.1%. This anxiety reflects the friction between an old set of expectations and the modern reality of slow wage growth and rising costs. Being behind often has less to do with personal willpower than with the economic environment. You're likely not saving enough according to these traditional rules, and that is entirely okay.
The guidelines we've been told to follow are highly generalized, and for many people, they simply do not work. Recognizing that the system's benchmarks are broken is the necessary first step to building a plan that fits a modern life. The underlying math behind those clean salary multiples has a major blind spot. It assumes you are starting your adult life from a perfectly blank slate, with zero savings but also zero debt. As this chart shows, millions of would-be savers don't start at zero. They start deep in the negative. The average student loan debt sits at over $34,000, acting as an anchor before you can even begin climbing the retirement stairs. Then there's the question of when you start. Every year you wait doesn't just push your timeline back, it steeply increases the percentage of your paycheck you surrender to catch up. This graph reveals the steep penalty for delaying. A 25-year-old might need to save 7 to 11% of their salary, but waiting until age 35 requires saving nearly 14% to reach the same destination. Even the ultimate finish line is an illusion. A flat $1 million sounds like absolute security, but for Americans living on the high-cost East and West Coasts, that amount will realistically last less than 20 years. Fixed salary multiples assume a predictable, stable path. They fail because they try to force deeply complicated, individualized financial lives into a single, generalized formula. For most of the 20th century, retirement was supported by a three-legged stool: pensions from your employer, Social Security from the government, and your own personal savings. Those mid-century government programs baked a very specific expectation into the culture. You worked until age 65, and then you stopped entirely, supported by a system designed to carry you through your remaining years. Today, the first leg of that stool is gone. Guaranteed corporate pensions have effectively vanished for the modern workforce. And the second leg, Social Security, was designed as a supplement. It was never intended to bear the full weight of a retiree's financial survival without the backing of a pension plan. So the workforce has adapted. Nearly 20% of Americans aged 65 and over are currently working. For many, continued labor has become the actual third leg of the retirement stool. Judging your financial health against an economic setup from the mid-20th century will only lead to unnecessary panic. The rules of that era no longer apply. Once you stop worrying about falling behind impossible milestones, you can start looking at your finances as a personalized triage operation. You simply do what you can, based on your actual circumstances. First, you can dispense with the noise about your daily habits. Purchases like avocado toast or a latte are not the reason your retirement account is stalling. The actual threats to your long-term cash flow are nearly invisible. Working hard to save $5 a day is completely offset when lifestyle creep sets in, or when splurging on a single big-ticket item drains the benefits of all that small frugality. Instead of agonizing over coffee, direct that attention to your debt. You need to know the exact interest rates on what you owe, particularly your student loans. This scale visualizes a concrete rule for triage. If any debt carries an interest rate above 6%, you should aggressively pay it down. But you balance that alongside your retirement accounts. You always contribute enough to capture your employer's full 401k match first, and then attack the high-interest debt with whatever is left. You might hear financial advisors throw around another imposing target, suggesting that workers need to save 15% of their salary. For someone juggling rent and loans, that number is currently unattainable. So adopt the 1% solution. Start at a manageable 6% contribution. Every year, deliberately increase that amount by just 1 or 2 percentage points. True retirement security involves tuning out the panic, evaluating individual debts and income, and reclaiming control through steady, small, customized adjustments. Success comes from the consistency of your progress, not from hitting an arbitrary one-size-fits-all target.
Are you aggressively maxing out your 401k every month, but leaving yourself completely exposed to a sudden financial emergency? It's a common trap for diligent savers. You do everything right on paper, but you end up retirement rich and cash poor. In the next 5 minutes, we are going to build a personal bucket strategy. This framework will give you access to liquid cash when you need it without triggering steep IRS penalties. To get started, gather your current bank and retirement statements so you can organize your money right alongside me. Because true financial security requires 2 things: a massive nest egg for tomorrow, and accessible cash for today. Step 1. Audit your current savings allocation. Look at your statements and check if 100% of your money is locked inside an employer-sponsored plan. If it is, you are at risk. Pulling money out of a 401k early comes at a massive cost.
Look at what happens to a $10,000 withdrawal once a 10% penalty plus state and federal taxes are sliced away. That specific combination of taxes and penalties devastates the final payout you actually receive in an emergency. Now, there is a small safety valve. Under extreme circumstances, you can take a hardship distribution. This waives the early withdrawal fee if the cash is used for IRS-qualified expenses, like covering medical bills, recovering from natural disasters, buying a primary residence, or preventing foreclosure. This happens more often than you might think. When wildfires destroyed parts of the Pacific Palisades, many high earners were caught entirely off guard and forced to tap their retirement savings to survive. But even if you qualify for that hardship exemption, financial advisors warn against it. Touching this money halts your compounding interest and permanently shortchanges your future. To prevent that, we need to divide your savings into 3 distinct buckets: a taxable brokerage, a Roth IRA, and your 401k. Let's focus on bucket number 1, the taxable brokerage account. This is your first line of defense. The primary benefit here is total flexibility. You can withdraw your baseline funds at any age without facing a single IRS penalty. The one rule to remember is that capital gains taxes will apply, but only on your investment profits, not the baseline cash you put in. Your checkpoint for success in step 2 is simple. Ensure your account settings allow you to transfer cash from this brokerage bucket directly to your checking account within 1 to 3 business days. This bucket serves as the absolute immediate shock absorber for life surprises, keeping your main retirement accounts perfectly safe. Once your first bucket is established, we move to bucket number 2, the Roth IRA. Think of this as your midterm fallback. This diagram shows how the Roth IRA acts as a hybrid. To use it correctly, you have to understand a crucial distinction that confuses many savers: the difference between your contributions and your investment profits. The green portion represents your contributions. Because you already paid taxes on this money, you can withdraw it at any time, for any reason, with 0 IRS penalties or taxes. However, the red portion represents your profits. If you withdraw those earnings early, you will trigger the exact tax penalties we are trying to avoid. This structure makes the Roth IRA uniquely powerful. You get long-term, tax-free growth, combined with a built-in, penalty-free emergency release valve. Now that the mechanics are in place, we need to calibrate your approach to avoid a psychological trap known as the saver's paradox, the very real regret of saving too much. Many workers aim to max out their savings at all costs. The FIRE movement, which stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early, takes this to the extreme, with some aiming to save up to 80% of their income. But financial advisors find that oversavers often reach retirement with a different kind of regret. They wonder if they should have traveled more extensively while they were younger, or helped their children buy a home. This split screen shows the difference. On one side, the extreme FIRE approach hoards every dollar. On the other, a balanced strategy actively funds both the future and the present. Take a look at your current budget. Find a percentage of your monthly savings that you can intentionally reallocate toward your present-day goals. It is perfectly acceptable to slightly lower your 401k contributions, provided you use that money to build up your flexible buckets. A successful financial plan requires balancing future security with a life worth living today. Let's review the finalized strategy. Your 401k is strictly for the long term. Your taxable brokerage is for immediate liquid cash, and your Roth IRA acts as your midterm backup. Setting up this system grants you the permission to spend money on your life today, guilt-free. Your final homework assignment is to log into your payroll or bank portal today and redirect just 5% of your savings into a Bucket 1 or Bucket 2 account. Taking this single action today removes the threat of being cash poor and hands you total control over your financial flow.